To be clear, I don't want to make any physiological claims about how this is going to affect the structure or function of any particular soft tissue. Not making any prehab or rehab claims or anything like that. Just in general, if this is a problem you're dealing with, tends to feel nice. And training when you feel nice is good.
Yeah, it's when you start. I was Googling something as you were talking because this got me thinking. I was like, back in the day, around 2012, 2013, I started doing hamstring curls before my squats. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I think I might have got that from John Meadows.
You probably did.
And so I was Googling it, and I did.
Yeah.
And I was looking at an article he wrote about it. And in the article, he said in 2 different spots, and this was a short article.
I don't know why it works.
I don't know why it works, and I do not have scientific evidence.
Yeah.
This is not science.
Yeah.
This is shit I do that feels good.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing in like the whole evidence-based fitness world is like, it is okay. Like there's nothing wrong with saying like, hey, this is like something that is not dangerous, is not deleterious. It seems to work nice, and I don't have scientific evidence for it.
Yeah.
Do with that what you will.
No, like that's something that I've talked about a lot before. Like I think, the key, for example, earlier in this episode is a great example of that. Like, I think a lot of people get themselves in trouble because they are unwilling to have the intellectual humility to say, like, hey, this thing seems good. Like it's a practical approach that seems to work for me. And, if you're having similar problems to the ones I'm having, maybe it's worth you experimenting with it as well. Like that's a perfectly valid thing to say. It's a very intellectually honest way to approach things where there's not a ton of conclusive evidence one way or the other, or just not any direct research at all. And I think people are unwilling to do that because they maybe think it makes them sound dumb or like less serious, or they think that people won't take their advice as seriously unless they make it seem like everything they say has a ton of supporting evidence. But no, I think it's important to be able to be honest about what level of evidence supports the things you say. And if it is just purely anecdotal, just say, this shit's anecdotal. Seems nice. But yeah, like the carb night stuff. If Kiefer just came out and said like, yeah, man, like if you're struggling with like food fixation through the day and controlling your total calorie intake, mostly just eat protein through the day, try eating some carbs at night. Seems to work pretty well for me. Give it a shot. I don't think anyone would have been upset about it, but that was a very controversial dietary approach because he went out on a limb and said like, yes, like this is going to be magical for these reasons. And it was just like completely bullshit, like massively over extrapolated, like basic physiology stuff that didn't actually support the claims he was making. And like, I feel that same way about like paleo stuff. Like, as far as kind of like popular fad diets go, the general dietary approach that paleo folks recommend is perfectly reasonable. It's like, mostly stick to unprocessed foods when possible. I mean, there are so many different schools of paleo, but like that's basically it. Like that's perfectly reasonable dietary advice. But then when they say, and this is going to work the best for performance, for health, for everything, because like this is what we evolved to eat. And then like more anthropological and paleontological evidence comes out showing like, oh yeah, the way you said Paleolithic people ate, yeah, you're full of shit. They didn't eat that. Like then paleo folks have egg on their face because it's like, oh yeah, you said this thing is good for these reasons. Turns out the reasons are wrong and you're an idiot. But like the general advice they're giving is often like decent advice. Yeah. And if they just stuck with the decent advice of like, if possible, eat less processed foods. Well, I guess that's not the best example because there is like direct evidence on eating less processed foods, but like you get my point.
Yeah.
just be honest about the level of evidence you have supporting something. And in my case, for my Coach's Corner segment, I don't have evidence other than feels nice for me. Seemed like it felt nice for John Meadows. Maybe it will feel nice for you.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, there's just like some little qualifiers. This whole approach of like, it works for me, I'm going to go ahead and recommend it to people. Like, it's important to accurately present the amount of support or lack of support for that idea. It's important that the idea does not have reasonable potential to be harmful or deleterious, right? So it's very different to say like, hey, like you're probably going to be pretty good in terms of your dietary goals if you generally pick stuff from this whole genre of foods versus like, just straight up orthorexia inducing propaganda, right? The second you deviate from the paleo foods, like you're going to get sick, dude. Like that's really bad.
Yeah.
Like, so there's a fine line between, it's gotta be, stuff that doesn't have potential to be truly deleterious or harmful. But also, like, the thing that drives me nuts about anecdotes that are shared in this context is, again, when people just are unable to say, like, hey, this is anecdotal. Like, when people take these anecdotes and then just reach for the closest science available and say, actually, this is evidence-based science that I'm giving you. It's like, yeah, it's not, though. So as long as people are kind of putting out the right caveats and not recommending things that are reckless, like this kind of anecdotal stuff certainly has a place in filling in the gaps with the way we approach training and nutrition.